Good evening, friends. I, Dr. Devesh Pandil, Associate Professor, Suresh Gyan Vihar University, Rajasthan, that is accredited by NAC A grade. Today, I will discuss about having statement in SQL. Now, I am presenting my PPT. I hope you can see my PPT. In this lecture, I will discuss about having statement in SQL, how to use the having statement in your SQL. SQL is the part of your database management system. When you are making a software, so your software is divided into two parts. First part is your front end language in which you can use the C, C++, any other programming language. And second part is your database part, that is your database management, in which you will use the databases like your Oracle. And as per I had told, SQL is the part of your database management. Through the SQL, SQL is your structure query language. Through the SQL, you can create the database, you can create the table, also you can insert the data into a table, also you can alter the data, you can delete the data, you can drop the table, you can update the data in your DBMS. That's why your SQL structure query language is the important part of your DBMS, because if you are making any software and if you are not using the database, so without database your software is nothing. And if you are using the database, in your database you can, through the database you can insert the data, you can delete the data, also you can update the data. That's why your SQL is the important part of your DBMS. And your having is the one of the statement of your structure query language. There are so many statement like your having, like your union. And in your about the union, I had already discussed in my past lectures. And today I am discussing about the having statement in your SQL. How to use the having statement in your SQL. Now, first of all, I will discuss about object and outcome of this lecture. You know your object, the main object of this lecture is to understand the concept of your having statement. What is the concept of your having statement? Why we will use the having statement? If we will not use the having statement, that time what will happen? That's why the object of this lecture is to understand the concept of your having statement. And if we will talk about the outcome of this lecture, so after studying this lecture, student will able to how to apply the having statement with your SQL query. And after studying this lecture, student, as per I heard, student will able to how to apply the having statement with your SQL query. And And now, during this lecture, I will cover so many topics in this lecture, like your first, as per I had told about the object and outcome, and also I will cover what is having statement, and also I will take the examples of your having statement. And after this lecture, I will discuss about the some questions which are related from the having statement, from the union statement. First is your having clause. You know, your having clause was added to SQL because the where keyword cannot be used with the aggregate functions. You know, if you are using the aggregate function and you want to use the having clause with your aggregate function, and you know, your where keyword cannot be used with the aggregate functions. You know, there are so many aggregate functions as per I had discussed in my past lectures, and here I am giving overview of your aggregate functions, like your sum, like your average, like your min, like your max, and like your count. Means these are the total five aggregate functions. You know, your main function, when you want to find the minimum value of that particular column, that time you will use the minimum function. Like that, suppose if you are having a table and in your table your salary is one of the column, and in this column suppose your 100 employee salary are or have are already inserted, and your employer want to find the minimum salary of your employee. So through the min function, through the min aggregate function, you can find the minimum salary of your employee. In the same manner, if we will discuss about the maximum salary of your employee, so that time you will use the max function, and through the max function you will find the maximum salary of your employee. In the same manner, if we will talk about the sum aggregate function, if we will talk about the count aggregate function, if we will talk about the average aggregate function, in your sum aggregate function, suppose your employer want to find the sum of the all employees salary, so that time you will use the sum aggregate function, and through the sum aggregate function you can find the sum of the all employee salary. And in the same manner, suppose your employer want to find the average salary of your employee. Suppose your one employee getting salary 100 rupee, other employee getting salary 200 rupee, other employee getting salary 300 rupee, and your all employee getting the different salary, and your employer want to find the average salary of your employee. That time you will find the average salary through the avg function, that is your average function. And suppose if your employer want to find the number of employee in your company, number of record in your table, so that time you will find the through the count function. Okay, so this is the your having clause. The having clause was added to SQL because the where keyword cannot be used with the aggregate function. That's why we will use the having function, having statement. And if we will talk about the syntax of the having statement, select column name. You know, select is the clause. You know, there are two clause, and your both clause are compulsory when you will write the query. First your clause is that your select clause, second clause is that your from clause. Through the select clause you will select the column. If you want to select the all columns of your table, that time you will use the star. Through the star you can select the all columns of your table. And if you want to select the only one or more than one columns, that time you will select the columns, and your all columns should be separated by comma. So here your syntax is your select column name from table name. From is your another clause, and through this clause you will access the your table. And your where condition, where is the another clause. This is the third clause. Where clause is not compulsory in any query. Your where clause you will use when you want to give the condition. Okay, that time you will use the where clause. If in your query, if there is no any condition, so you will not use the where clause, because as per I had told, you will use the where clause when you will mention when your condition is mentions in your query. And your group by, that is your group by, that is your statement column name, and having condition, and your order by column name. Your order by means your column, your attribute will be represent in your ascending or your descending order. If you want to find the particular column in your ascending order, so your ASC you will not mention, because this is the by default mode. Ascending order is the by default mode in your query. And DESC, if you want to find the your columns value in your decreasing order, that time you will mention your DESC in your explicitly mode. Here I had taken a table, and in this table, I had taken uh, 7 to 8 attribute. First attribute is your customer ID. Second attribute is your customer name, contact me, address, city, postal code, and your country. And in this table, I had already inserted four tuples who have customer ID 1, 2, 3, and your 4. And your customer name are different contact names, address, and city, and your postal code, and your country. And here I am using the SQL having example. You know, your example is that the following SQL statement list the number of customers in each country. Means the objective of this query is that you will write the SQL statement, list the number of customers in each country. Only include country with more than 5 customers. Okay, that means you will write the query for this objective. Your example is that select count. Your count is your aggregate function, and here I have used the count function, because as per your object, you will write the SQL statement, list the number of customers, means how many customers, mean total number of customers. That's why I have used the count aggregate function. Your country is the another column from customers. Customer is your table name. Okay, that's why I have for this access this table, I have used the from clause. And group by is your statement, and here you will access the your country, and you're having count customer ID greater than 5. Okay, so you will count only those customers who have ID is greater than from your 5. Okay, That's why I have written this query according to this objective. Your objective is that, as per I had told, SQL statement lists the number of customers in each country. Only include country with more than five customers. Okay, your select is your keyword, from is your keyword, group by is your statement, and having is your statement. And through this query, you will find only those records who have customer ID greater than 5. And the following SQL statement lists the number of customers in each country. Sorted high to low, only include country with more than 5 customers. And the example is that select is the column, count, you will count the number of customer ID, and country is the another column, and your from customer is your, as per I had told, is your table name. Your group by is your statement that will apply as per the object of this query on your country, having count customer ID greater than 5. Okay, and order by count customer ID DSC means you will count the all customer ID in your descending order. That's why I had mentioned the DSC. If you will count the in customer ID in your ascending order, that time your ASC is not required, because ASC is the by default. And I had taken another table. In this table, your columns are your order ID, customer ID, employee ID, order date, and your shipper ID. And your order IDs are 10248, 10249, 10250. Customer ID are 90, 81, and your 34. Employee ID 5, 6, and 4. Order date this, and your shipper ID 3, 1, and 2. And also I had taken another table, and in which columns are employee ID, last name, first name, birth date, photo, and your notes. And your employee ID is 1, 2, 3. In this table, I had inserted the three records who have employee ID 1, 2, and your 3. And your last name, first name, birth date, photo, notes are column name. And in this column, I had already inserted the three records. And more examples about your having the following SQL statement lists the employees that have registered more than 10 orders. Means you will find only list of those employees that have registered more than 10 orders. So you will write the query for this. Select employee dot last name. Employee is your table, and last name is your column name, and your count order dot order ID. Okay, as number of orders. Okay, and from orders, inner join employee on orders dot employee ID equal employees dot employee ID. And here you will use the group by clause on your last name column, having count order dot order ID greater than your 10, because you will find the only those employees list who have registered more than 10 orders. And now your SQL union all with where union all is your statement, and with I am discussing about with your where. The following SQL statement return the German cities duplicate value also from both the customer and the supplier table. Your example is that select city country from customers, because here you will select the only two column name. First, your first column name is your city, and second column name is your country, and your table name is your customers, where your country is your Germany. Means you will find only those customer name, those record your who have city is your who have country is your Germany. And here I have used the union all keyword. Select city country from the supplier, your supplier and your customers both are the tables, and you will fetch the record from customer tables and your supplier tables, where country is your Germany, order by your city. This is the example of your union all with your where clause. And here you will combine the records of your who have fetched from your customer table according to the condition, and who have fetched from your suppliers table as per your condition. Okay. And you will take the city as in your ascending order, not a descending order, because here I had not mentioned the DSC. Here I had no mention, not a DSC, not a ASC. That's why by default your ASC. And your SQL union by clause, the group by statement group row that have the same value into summary row, like find the number of customers in each country. And the group by statement is often used with the aggregate function. Here I have to use the union by, not a union all. If you will use the only union, so means your union will apply on the district. Okay. SQL union by clause, the group by statement group row that have the same value into summary row, like find the number of customers in each country. The group by statement is often used with aggregate functions like your count, max, minimum, and your sum and AVG. These are the all aggregate function to group the result set by one or more columns. And you know the syntax select column name from table name, where condition, group by column name, and order by column name. And here I had taken a table in which your attributes are customer ID, customer name, contact name, address, city, postal code, and your country. And your rows, I had already inserted the four row, your first, second, third, and your fourth. Means I had inserted the four tuples who have customer ID 1, 2, 3, and your fourth, and your customer name are I have already inserted, contact name already inserted, address, city, postal code, and your country. And group by example, the following SQL statement lists the number of customers in each country. For example, select count customer ID. You know, you will select the customer ID and country, and you want to find the count the all customer ID. And second is your country. Country is your another column, and you want to select from the customers table and group by country. Your country is your column, and your group by will apply on this country column. And the following SQL statement lists the number of customers in each country sorted high to low. For example, select count customer ID. Customer ID is your column name and your country is your column name. And you want to find the number of customer ID. That's why I have to use the count function from the customer table, and group by country is your column, and order by customer ID DESC, because you want to count the all customer ID in your decreasing fashion, not a ascending fashion. That's why I have used the DESC, that is your descending. Here I had taken a table in which I had taken a five attributes like your order ID, customer ID, employee ID, order date, and your shipper ID. Okay, and I had already inserted the three records like your 10248, 10249, and your 10250, and your customer IDs. I had already inserted, employee ID already inserted, order date already inserted, and your shipper ID I have already inserted. And now, and a selection from the shippers table. I had taken a table in which your columns are your shipper ID and shipper name. Shipper IDs are 1, 2, 3. Shipper name are Speedy Express, United Package, and your Federal Shipping. Okay. And here I will use the group by with your join example. Okay. The following SQL statement lists the number of orders sent by each shipper. Here I am taking this table of your shipper table, and the query for this purpose, select shippers dot shipper name count. You will use the count order dot order ID as number of orders from the orders table. Left join shipper on orders dot shipper ID equals shippers dot shipper ID group by shipper name. Group by clause. And the SQL having clause. The having clause was added to the SQL because where keyword cannot be used with the aggregate function. I had already talked about the aggregate functions like your min, like your max, like your count, like your ABG, like your sum. And you are having syntax like your select column name from table name where you know about the condition, and group by your group by will apply on your column name having is your condition, and order by your column name. And I had taken a table. In this, attributes are customer ID, customer name, contact me, address, city, postal code, and your country. And you're having example for this purpose. The following SQL statement list the number of customers in each country. Only include countries with more than 5 customers. Means you will include only those country only who have with more than 5 customers. So for example, for this purpose, select count customer ID. I think you know about the select clause, from clause, and your where clause. And here you will not use the where clause. So select count customer ID country from customers table group by country having count customer ID greater than 5. And I have written a query according to your objective. And as per I had told, end of this lecture, I will discuss about the some questions which are related from your DBMS, that is your database management system. Your question is that which of the following is not involved in your DBMS, like your end users, data, application request, and your HTML. So your data is not involved in your DBMS, application request is not which of the following is not involved. End users is involved in your DBMS, data is involved in your DBMS, application request is involved in your DBMS, and HTML, that is your hypertext markup language, is not involved in your DBMS. That's why your answer will be your D answer. And HTML is not involved as per I had told database management system. Other thing like the data and application request are the part of the DBMS. And other question is that database is generally system centered, user centered, company centered, and your data centered. Database is generally concerned from the user centered. That's why I have told database is a user centered. The perspective is that user is always right. If there is problem with the use of the system is the problem, not the user. And a characteristics of an entity. Entity is the person, place, like your car is your entity, table is your entity, student is your entity. And the characteristics of an entity, that is these are the attributes. The features of your entity is called the attributes. The characteristics of the entity is called the attributes. That's why your options are in this question: relation, attribute, parameter, and constraint. As per I had told, the characteristics and the features of the entity is called the attribute. So your answer will be the attribute. And an attribute is a characteristics of an entity. As per I had told, the association among the entities is described by the relationship. And next question is that the restrictions placed on the data, relation, attribute, parameter, and constraint. So your answer will be is the constraint. Your constraint is a restriction that is placed on the data. Attribute is the characteristics, and the relation describe the association. And MS stand for Information Mastering System, Instruction Management System, Instruction Manipulating System, Information Management System. Your answer will be your D answer. Your MS stand for Information Management System. It is the developed to manage the large amount of data for the complex projects. Object equal to fill in the blanks plus relationship. Your first option is your data. Second option is that your attribute. Third option is that your entity. And fourth option is that your constraint. So your object equal to attributes plus relationship, and that's why your answer is your entity, because it is the part of your object oriented database model. And your entity maintain the advantage of your er model like your entity relationship model, where you will define the relation between the entity, how your one entity will connect from the another entity. And in your one-to-one relationship, in your one-to-many relationship, in your many-to-one relationship, in your many-to-many relationship. And the right shift operator is that, your greater than left, your answer will be your A answer. And your another question is that your which operator compress sound, match sound, check sound, sound like, and your sound similar. So your answer will be your C answer, that is your sound like. And the last question is that what does RTF refer to? Rich text format, write text format, rich text function, and your write text function. Your answer will be your A answer, that is your rich text format. In this lecture, I had discussed about the having clause, and also I had discussed about the other statements like your union statement, like your union all. And the main objective of this lecture is that describe the having clause, describe the having statement, like your what is a having statement, why you will use the having statement, what is the purpose of your having statement. And in this lecture also I had discussed about the union statement and the union all statement. If we will use the only union statement, so means you will select the only distinct, you will select the distinct. Like, yes, suppose in your mathematical term, if we will talk about the union operation, so if you are having the two sets like your A set and like your B set, and you want to find the union between both set, in your A set and in your B set. So you suppose your A sets elements are your 1 2 3 4 5, and your B set elements are your 6 7 8. And when you will apply the union operation between A and B, so you will write A union B, and in your union of A and B, in your union there are all elements which are already inserted in your A and in your B set, but your any element will not repeat. That is the condition of your union operation. Okay. And if we will talk about the in your SQL, and if we will talk about the union all, so union all means you will also take the duplicate. Okay. In through the union all keyword, and if you will use the only union, so you will use the only distinct, you will use only different. That's why I had in this lecture I had used the union all and your union. I hope you have understood about the having clause, how you will use the having clause with your statement. If we will talk about the summary of this lecture, so As you know, where keyword cannot be used with the aggregate functions, and the aggregate function means you can't use the where keyword with your avg function, with your min, that is your minimum function, with your max, that is your maximum function, with your sum, means you can't use the where keyword with your aggregate functions, as per I had told, like your min, max, average, sum, and your count. And I hope you have understood about this lecture. Thank you.